Hello guys, today I'd like to make this video to show you how to look at and complete this source set activity I've got for you. It's over early Islam again, but for this one we're going to be looking at the population expansion of this Islamic empire right here in green compared to the Christian empires of like Europe up here. So if you remember, so we've got the Caliphate right here. So let me back up way back. So Islam started around here, where I'm kind of moving my cursor. Islam started around here along Mecca and Medina. This is where the Prophet Muhammad got his revelation from an angel, Gabriel, who was sent by God and revealed to him, the religion of Islam, which he went on to create. And of course, Islam spread during that time. So around 500 AD is when Prophet Muhammad lived and died. And then Islam spread rapidly throughout the Arabian Peninsula right here. Then it spread to the west into parts of near the border of India up into what are these areas? This is kind of the lower, kind of the western Middle Eastern areas. Of course, it spread into northern Africa, and at its height spread into Spain, in fact. So this is what is known as the Umayyad Caliphate at its greatest extent in Anno Domini 750. So 750 AD. So 750 years after the beginning of Christ. Okay. So so a caliphate is kind of like a empire, or it's a it's like this big collective of land, or it's like an empire basically. It's like a political religious empire, kind of what the Christians were doing too. So the caliphates were ran by certain leaders, and they were known as caliphs. So it's just caliphate with the eight taken off the end, a caliph. So the caliphs are like the rulers, and this particular caliph oversaw the Umayyad Caliphate, which spread over all of the Middle East and into North Africa, and they invaded and held on to Spain for a very, very long time. So Spain didn't just, the Spanish Christians just didn't allow them to walk in and have Spain. No, the Muslims came into Spain, took it over, and said, we're in charge now. And of course this probably worried the rest of Europe. They was thinking like, we don't want to become Muslims. We don't want to be ruled by Muslims. We want to stay, Christian. So that's the extent of the empire. It was very large, and it kind of made it plain that the Muslims and Islam is a force to be reckoned with in the world, and it was under threat. But it also was it threatened Christianity and a lot of other different beliefs in the world. But let's think about the differences. So, for one, Islam was situated in the Mediterranean, where a lot of the old Roman cities and trade routes were. So they held on to a lot of the knowledge and information the Romans left behind. Whereas the Christian church didn't really have much to do with the old world and the classical world's understanding of science and medicine and information and technology. The Christian world tended to focus more on the religious aspect of life and less on the practical side of life, like let's solve diseases, let's figure stuff out, let's work on new types of math. But the Muslim world spent a lot more time developing medicine, math. So a lot of you study algebra. Well, you have the Muslims to thank for that. The Muslims came up with algebra. Algebra means to reunite missing parts, which is, or like to find the unknown, which is what you do in algebra. You're finding, x or variables. So yeah, they had all kinds of medicine and other things that the Christian world in Europe kind of didn't have much to do with for a lot of their early history. But even still, the Christians and the Muslims were at odds with each other for a very long time, and they're going to go to war with each other along this area right here in a series of wars called the Crusades. You've probably heard of them before. So the First, Second, and Third Crusades, where the Christians of Europe tried to take back the Christian lands, the lands where Jesus walked and had his teachings, and the Christians believed that these lands should belong to Christians. So they fought the Muslims to regain these areas. And eventually the Europeans and the Christians would, push out the Muslims in Spain, and this would be known as the Reconquista. And the people who fought in those wars, the conquistadors, which is conqueror in Spanish, that's what that means, conquistador. The conquistadors would be some of the first explorers to sail across the Atlantic Ocean and discover the Americas. But that's way later. So, yeah, you kind of got this understanding of what the Muslims are, what they're about around this period, and what the European Christians were like. So one of the most powerful Christian empires of this time were known as the Franks. And you can think of the Franks as like the early French. So here we go. We'll move over to this right here. And of course, we've got China, of course. China is on the map too. So we have let's look at the directions. So comparing sizes of post-classical states. Carefully examine the table and graph. Briefly note any questions you have and use them to inform your answers to the questions below. So source A, comparing sizes of post-classical states. So we got the states. We have Tang Dynasty of China, the Umayyad Caliphate, the Franks in Europe, which were the largest group in Europe at that time. So as we can see here, the Tang Chinese had at the year 715 AD, it encompassed the size of about 2 million square miles, or 2,100 square miles, whichever, and it had a population of 53 million people. So that's not surprising. China was had a lot of good things going for it. It was unified. There was, they didn't have a great collapse like Europe did with the Roman Empire. So they were kind of steadily growing and at a nice pace. And they were getting to trade with Europe. So that was a plus for them too. Then we have the Umayyad Caliphate. So the year 720, it encompassed a size of about 4 million square miles, or 4,300 square miles, and it had a population of 16.2 million people. So an area that's largely desert was able to, support a population, one of the largest populations in the early world, 62 million people. So that says a lot about, their culture and what they were able to do. So perhaps their respect and appreciation for medicine and culture, and along with their religion, allowed them to grow to such a size because they were able to create such complex and prosperous societies. And then we have the Franks in Europe. So the Franks make up the bottom. Even much later, after like the heyday or the peak of the Caliphate and the Chinese, the Franks area was very small, but understandably, the European peninsula was much smaller than these areas, so not a lot of space for people to grow out, and they only had about 10 to 20 million people. I find this funny. We're not very clear on how many people. It's like a between 10 and 20 million. It's not like an exact number like we have up here, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, and then you have right down here, you have a comparison. So in the years, we have the span of years down here, and then the higher the arc is, the amount of area or how large the empire was. So you see, and this is all Western Asian countries. So the Caliphate tops it off. Like it's not even a competition. Like Umayyad Caliphate, the Abbasid Caliphate, that's like another caliphate around the same time. The Umayyad and the Abbasid Caliphate top it off. So the Muslims were, they had no challengers. This was the time to be a Muslim. This was their golden age. And it is often called the golden age of Islam around this period. Okay, so here we go. So compare the populations of the three post-classical empires from the table. Roughly speaking, about how much of the world's population was made up of the Umayyad Caliphate. So you got to do a little bit of mental math for this one. So how much of the world's population was made up of the Umayyad Caliphate? So in the years, the world's population was estimated to be 210 million. By the year 800, it was approximately 220 million. So what you would kind of do is you kind of add up all these numbers and then see what percentage, or you could guesstimate it, you could say a third or half of the world's population was part of the Umayyad Caliphate. Whichever, I haven't added them up yet. That's something you have to do. But I believe it would come out to about that amount. So 2, what stands out about the growth of the Umayyad Caliphate? What conclusions can you draw based on this? So knowing what we know about the growth of civilizations, and what civilizations need to grow and develop, what did the Umayyad Caliphate have going for them? And what have I kind of talked about so far that would make you, that would support their growth for that? Okay, so you have 3, consider the information from the chart and graph along with the maps of the Arabian Peninsula. So you would have to go back to the earlier maps. How might the Arabian Peninsula's geographic location have contributed to the growth and spread of the early Islamic states? So you'll go back and look at the maps of the Arabian Peninsula. So so this part right here, this is the Arabian Peninsula. This part that kind of juts out into the ocean. That is the Arabian Peninsula. So what about this area probably made it good for its growth? So 4, use the following sentence stems to describe the geography of the Arabian Peninsula and to explain the growth and spread of the early Islamic states. So you've got to create a sentence stem using this. So you'll use this. So you'll copy, although the Arabian Peninsula was located in a very inhospitable and hot area. It was connected to Africa, Asia, and Europe by trade routes that, and that's how you finish it. And you have the last one right here. And so like this, you'll just copy this out right here. And your answers will be what you write in the blanks. 5, based on the information gleaned from the sources in class discussion, craft 3 complex sentences about the dominant Islamic state during the post-classical period. All right, so you've got these 3 sentence stems right here. And what you've got to do is finish them for this answer.